Hello, everyone.
Hello, good morning, Lolita. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you again. And you have been, let's say, a constant attendee at these conferences and a contributor and a leader, and we really appreciate that. The last 5 years as momentum has been building, you've been building that momentum. We really appreciate that. Lolita, 5 years ago, when COP was held here in Glasgow, a whole series of announcements and propositions were made about sustainable finance, climate finance, renewable finance, transition finance, and so much more. Could you just take a minute to tell us, in a sense, what your scorecard is for the progress that's been made? Where has there been progress and where has there not been progress from your point of view?
Sure, but I want to first introduce myself very quickly to the audience. This is not my first or even fifth time in Scotland. I'm a global Scot, number one. Number two, I'm part Scottish. This is actually my tartan, Clan McLennan. Any McLennans in the house? And thirdly, I've worked with Glasgow for the last at least 10 years. I was the keynote speaker at the resilience plan that was announced in 2016 for Glasgow. So I have a long history here.
Welcome back.
Thank you. My first COP ever was COP26, and what a time it was. So for those of you who were there, I was very happy to be here in this wonderful city. And a lot of cities, it was the first time they had come to COP. And so one of the things I want to talk about is that I used to work for the city of New York before the job that I have now for 15 years. And I was not representing New York at that time, but I did notice that so many cities that had never come to COP before were here. And they were talking to, for the first time often, private finance and financial firms in general, figuring out how to combine their efforts and work together. So that was the first time I'd ever seen that to that degree. There were many commitments, as you said, that had been announced. The Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero was announced along with others at that time. And while some of those coalitions didn't really work out the way that people intended, many firms were still quietly doing the work, and that was the first sort of foray in them starting to do that. The US market right now is in a tough spot because of federal preemption and the man who shall not be named. Offshore wind in particular, for those of you who have been following, if you don't already have a project that has been permitted, it's probably not going to get started very soon because you often need federal permits in the waters to be able to have your offshore wind farms. And as you may have seen in the news, some of those projects have been rescinded. Some firms even got paid to not do their projects anymore and the like. So there's some headwinds there in the US for that. In addition, solar and EVs, are being stymied because the tax credits that allowed those to be more affordable projects have either been allowed to expire or have been actually rescinded. So even pleading from the red state governors in the US around job loss and economic growth has largely fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately. So cities are the place where much of the action is happening. For those of you, anybody go to COP30, in Rio or Belém, and Susan and I were there together. Many, many cities came together. In fact, 30 US mayors and 100 US cities were represented. We were the second largest delegation, as well as many, many other cities around the world. Glasgow, Scotland, and other cities were represented as well to really recommit to that coming together around finance. But more importantly, finance and the private sector was welcomed. There were a number of speeches given saying, hey, we all need to work together, because what's happening is that with the federal monies and other monies not coming in from government, you really need to have those partnerships. So we found that that's really happening to a larger degree. And I want to give one example. In New York City, we have a project called the Champlain-Hudson Power Express. It's a 335-mile transmission line from Quebec to New York City, $6 billion project. The transmission line was funded by a portfolio company of Blackstone, and it will provide power for all municipal needs for New York City. So it's creating 1,400 union jobs, and the line is fully buried. So it's not even really bothering people as far as their farms and views and that sort of thing. But this happened as part of New York City's climate plan. I'm proud to have been part of the team in 2019 that first conceived of this, and it's finally happening and should be online by the end of this summer. So that's just an example of how cities are coming together to be able to provide these jobs, to provide these projects with private finance.
Great, Lolita, thank you very much. So there's a mixed picture, as it were, on the progress, but you're pointing to an area of hope through action, which is that the cities are actually taking this forward and they're finding good partnerships with the financial community and those who are sticking with it. So just give us a little insight then. Have you yourselves been able to make any investments in Scotland in the last few years? And if so, where have you been able to deploy capital?
So I'm proud to say, because I think I really helped get this deal done, we are the firm that won. How many people know what Kikanzi Power Station was in Kikanzi? A few of you. So they put up a tender, the East Lothian Council, to make that into a data center campus, and my firm actually won the tender for that. And that started because I've been coming to Scotland for years. I've been meeting with Scottish Enterprise as a Global Scot and other reasons, and I said, we'd like to invest in Scotland. Help us figure that out. So people from Scottish Enterprise would drive us around, talk about projects. We bid on some other ones that we didn't get. But I honestly feel that spending that time, because I know Scottish people love to see you. They don't want to see you on the Zoom. They don't want to see you on the Teams. You need to show up in person. I came here, and 11 days I had to quarantine in 2021 before I was able to meet with the person. But I said, I'm still coming. And I think doing that work and spending the time here in Scotland with the Scottish people really enabled my firm to really have a leg up in making that deal. So as I said, we won the tender last summer, and it's going to provide 200 megawatts of power for a data center. It's right adjacent to 1.1 gigawatt offshore wind farm, as well as a battery energy storage system that's 350 megawatts. So it's literally the best data center location in Scotland, and we got it. So I'm very, very proud of that. But one of the more important parts of that is that it's a JV with the council. So they have skin in the game. They're going to be working with us on the community relations, which is, I think it's the only site in Scotland that will have a firm that's partnered with the JV, with the actual council. And I've just found in general that Scotland is a far easier place to do renewable energy for a data center than the US. Most of the ones in the US tend to be natural gas, and hopefully it'll be energy efficient, but very few opportunities to do renewable. Somebody talked about nuclear. Microsoft actually has purchased the old 3 Mile Island nuclear plant for their own use, but there's so few opportunities to do that. It tends to be natural gas, and it's causing a lot of problems. You may have seen that there's moratoria. People are very upset. The pitchforks are coming out. But in Scotland, you can actually do it in a renewable way and do it with the community. So for us, that was very, very appealing, and I'm really excited to really be involved with that. But one thing I also wanted to say before we move on is that my role with the New York City Mayor's Office, one of the things I did was I helped run Climate Week for the city. And one of the things I noticed that the Danes and the Dutch, they come out and say, we're great, we have these great projects. Scotland's better, but you need to start pounding your chest. So I'm just going to give you that advice. And for those of you who are from the Glasgow Chamber, you know I'm also one of the people in charge of Tartan Week. So Tartan Week just happened a few weeks ago. I see some people in the audience who came to that, and it was really great to see the businesses represented and coming out, and we want to see more of that and do more partnerships with the U.S. and with Scotland in particular.
So should we get them to practice pumping the chest now, Lisa?
Right.
What would that look like? So you're saying something about Scotland being a very attractive place for sustainable investment, but it needs a confident counterparty to come forward with projects. And I suppose that the question I'd like to ask you maybe in a minute is, what's your advice to any CFO, CEO, other executive leader in the room? What do they need to do? But before that, there's a ton of questions, Lolita, have come in from the people in the room. So one question is that there's much greater investment in energy and net zero compared to circularity or to waste management. Do you think that's true? And if it is true, why is that the case?
Well, my own firm, which I hadn't said yet, we actually do a lot of work in energy efficiency because up to 70% of energy is wasted between transmission and distribution. And so we find that using that waste energy is really, really important for cost savings, quite frankly. So for example, we actually own the gas grid of Stockholm, Sweden. And so we take waste and we turn it into gas for cooking and for buses. We're also able to take a lot of the waste heat from some of our projects and use it for district heating, as you mentioned earlier. So there actually is circularity that is happening in a number of businesses like my own. We were founded in 2007 on the concept of energy efficiency. So that actually is happening.
So that's a kind of invitation to people in the room to bring their circularity and waste to energy projects to you.
Yes, please.
If I've got
we'll
that
take
right. Another question here is the lower costs to generate hasn't reduced energy bills, somebody says. It's actually just increased profits. Do you think that improved regulation has a role to make sure that, as it were, the benefits of investing in decarbonized energy actually play through to the consumer?
So I can speak from a commercial standpoint. I'll give you an example of a project that we did. The oldest hospital in London, I believe it was founded in something like 1100 or something like that. Things are not, when we say in the U.S. things are old, it's 1700 something, so it's a little older than that. It's a children's hospital, St. Bart's, and we actually put in an on-site power generator for them, so combined heat and power, and the cost savings was shared both by our firm and by the hospital. They were able to take those cost savings and actually, because this was before COVID, and use those to hire more nurses. So there are models out there that you actually can have cost savings that are passed on to the, in fact, that's the model that we do, that those savings are actually passed on. So I can't speak to for residential because that's a whole other regulatory issue, but I feel like with commercial, you can do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Another person has asked, investment in data centers, are we clear how that's going to affect water in the local ecosystem, as it were, the environmental consequences of data centers?
So there's different ways of cooling data centers, and often the ones that you hear about the most, like we're just going to take all the water, we're going to take all the water that you would drink, and that's it. But there's so many other models. There's models that you can use non-potable water and you can recycle the water. There's others that have different cooling mechanisms that don't use hardly any water at all. So it just really depends on the type of cooling system that's set up. And some of the earlier companies were not as careful. I have to say a number of companies in this space are not good at public relations. My first job with the mayor's office in New York City was Manhattan Director of Community Affairs. So if people are mad, you have to listen to them. And you have to take in their concerns. So I'm used to that, but some other of the companies may not have had a me to do that properly, or may not have really cared. They just wanted to come in, and unfortunately also some of this was done in secrecy for some of the deals where they just talked to the mayor, or they talked to the council, and they didn't talk to anyone else, they didn't get any input, and so it didn't really matter. Now it matters greatly, because you kind of wonder sometimes why there are even data centers in a dry place like Arizona if they're not going to use different cooling and use all the water. So this is really an existential issue in the U.S. in particular. So thank you for that question, because there are different ways to do it, and the company has to care enough to think about what those alternatives are.
Thank you so much, Lolita. We're going to do 3 more questions and then give you a big round of applause. There's 3 or 4 questions on the same topic, which is, what does a city that's really optimizing its pathway and attracting sustainable finance, what does it do that other cities that are not optimizing it don't do? What's the secret sauce that makes a city really investable?
Now, some people in the audience have heard me say this before, so if you heard it, just laugh again anyway. I have something called the 3 Ps: policies, procurement, and planning. So you need to have those things be streamlined and make sure that it's almost frictionless for someone to come in and talk to you. Have projects ready, so investable projects. So a project that's only $50,000 may not be invested. You may need to come together with another city or another council and say, we can aggregate up and have all the EV chargers so that that contract is now £3 million instead of 500,000 pounds. Those sorts of innovative ideas attract private investment, because certain companies have levels that they have to have as a minimum investment. The very, very large ones won't talk to you under 100 million. My company may talk to you if it's only 5 million, but it needs to be up to 5 million. It can't be just 100,000. And so things like that, just thinking through creative ways and also it's financing, not necessarily, a gift. So there has to be some return somewhere that has to be able to be earned. That's another thing. So.
People in the room are inspired by you, Lolita, and
thank
somebody
you.
is asking the question, since COP26, have you seen the influence and presence of women in driving the climate change agenda increase? And do you think that any challenges remain in this regard?
Ooh, that's a hard one. So I used to often be the only female in the room, only black person in the room, only. And I'm finding a lot more people, a lot of young people are inspired. One thing I didn't say, I have a lot of things in my bio, but I teach a university class at the University of Pennsylvania. I teach graduate students. All of my students but one in my last class were women. And the class was Fundamentals of Climate Action Planning for Cities. So all these women want to go into the cities around the world. It was a global cohort of people, and they want to go help their cities make change in the climate area. And it was, like I said, it was all women but one in my class.
Thank you, Lolita. So my final question, talking to the people in the room, if there's anyone in the room, whether they're a CEO, an executive, a board member, a CFO, and they want to be more ready to better access sustainable finance, climate finance, transition finance, whatever language we're going to use, what's the sort of 1, 2, 3 of things that they need to do to be ready?
So, some of what I just said was allow the processes to have less friction, so make it as friction-free as possible to be able to deal with you. And the pathways to a deal need to be clear and not take long periods of time in general. Show how renewable energy and energy efficiency lowers operating costs. So work with that company to figure out how that would work for you. Measurable data such as energy savings, waste reduction, et cetera, things that you can come tangibly to say, this is what I want to work on. And proximity to other opportunities is also a plus. So having other opportunities in the horizon as well. And avoid greenwashing.
Just say that again, avoid?
Greenwashing.
Right, we're going to avoid greenwashing. Lolita, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being such an inspiration. Lolita Jackson, everyone.